you for inviting me to speak at your conference. I'm going to talk today about career guidance, social justice, and supporting youth transitions. So this is what we're going to cover today, and let's start with the idea of understanding careers. So career is our journey through life, learning, and work. And just as we can see here, our journeys are rarely straightforward. They often involve many choices and many kind of changes of direction. Our careers go on throughout our life, from when we're first born right through to the end of our life. And our careers, as well as taking place over the course of our life, they also take place day by day. Career is a constant process of balancing learning, work, money, family, all of our hobbies and interests and everything else that we want to do. And we rarely career alone. We're almost always engaging in career with other people, people around us. So careers then are where individuals meet, they navigate and possibly transcend the social structures that are around them. And they're also where we are subject to and where we resist power. So career is where we try and make our lives the best they can be, regardless of the circumstances in which we live. So careers can feel very individual. Your career feels like it only belongs to you, but they matter an awful lot for organizations, so for your employer, your learning provider, but also for the society in which you live. So for better or worse, alone and together, our careers are how we shape our lives and participate in the world. In short, careers are where and how we live our life. So let's think about this idea of career guidance and why that matters. So career guidance is a whole range of different interventions that describe how we find out about work uh, and all aspects of work. Now, whether that's professional work, high skill work, or whether that's agricultural work or low skill work, it doesn't matter. Career guidance is how we can find out about these things and explore them. And it's also, of course, where we navigate the education system, where we find out about learning and decide what is the best pathway for us, and hopefully choose something in which we're going to succeed and thrive. And career is also where we find meaning in our life. Now, that might be a little more abstract than this idea of finding work or finding out about work or finding learning. But of course, we're also trying to find out what is meaningful to us in our life. And career guidance helps us to do this. So career guidance helps all of us because we all need a little help with all of these things, with figuring out our lives, with figuring out our direction, with figuring out the pathway that we're going to take. So we wrote about this in a book, me and my colleagues, Ronald Sultana and Rhea Thompson, who I've worked with a lot. And we say career guidance supports individuals and groups to discover more about work, leisure and learning, to consider their place in the world and plan for their futures. Career guidance can take a wide range of forms. It draws on diverse theoretical traditions, but at its heart, it's a purposeful learning opportunity which supports individuals and groups to consider and reconsider work, leisure and learning in the light of new information and to experiences and to take both individual and collective action as a result of this. So career guidance is not just one-to-one counselling, it's a wide range of things which through giving people information, learning and experience, they can help to figure out their life. So how do we use this in order to support youth transitions? But what we know, if we think about young people are surrounded by lots and lots of different things, lots of different resources, lots of different challenges, lots of different people. So around a young person are their family, are their friends, are their school, are their community. And all of these things are going to make a difference to how young people's lives go. So this then raises the question of how young people learn about career. And in this model, I've got a sort of model which describes the influences which work on people's careers. So if we look around them, we can see work and education, we can see their social context, their culture, their interactions with peers, but also what we describe as modeling and feedback. So people see others and they want to be like them, they want to learn from them, or perhaps they want to learn not to be like them. And that might be your father, your teacher, a friend, a colleague, an uncle, all sorts of people. And so these are all influences on people's careers. So how do people actually develop their career? Well, the first thing is they need to become aware that they have a career. They need to become aware that there is something in their life they can control. And then they need to become motivated to do so, to get informed about that, to learn about the possibilities that are out there. And then they need to do some exploring and also some experiencing. They need to go out and find out about this stuff, ideally through actually having a try of different things that interest them. And then they need to reflect on this, analyze it, think about it, and then build some kind of personal theory. And by that, I don't mean a kind of scientific theory. I mean, they need to sit and think, what does this mean to me? What am I going to do about this? And then they build a plan and start practicing that, start what we might call careering. And the important thing about this is a spiral. We're going round and round these different things. We're always becoming aware, becoming motivated, getting informed, exploring and experiencing, reflecting and analysing, theorising, planning and practicing and careering. But it doesn't stop. We do this at school. When we leave school, we probably get a job, and the whole process goes round again. And it keeps going round through our whole life as we try and figure it all out. So this is an ongoing process, a process of learning where we're learning from the world around us, and we're also going through a process of learning. So what can we do to help people with this? We need to build what's often called scaffolds. So these are these poles we have around buildings that help the building to be put upright. And it's the same for learning. We need to give young people scaffolding. We need to give them help and support and guidance about where to put things. And as they then do their learning, we help them, for example, to find out more or to start their exploration or to build a plan. And we can help them with this as they go around, but they have to do the career learning themselves. So how do we do this? Well, we do it through a range of different practices. These are what we call career guidance practices. So we've got a whole set of them here, informing people, advising them, so telling them what's possible, counselling them, getting down into some of these deep psychological issues about their identity and so on. We need to help them to assess their strengths, their weaknesses, what they'll be good at, and we need to also educate them about the world. We also need to do some other things. We need to enable them, support them, empower them to take up the opportunities that are available to them. We need to connect them to the people around them, brokering relationships, for example, between a young person and an employer who they might want to work for. Sometimes we need to stand up and speak for people, to advocate for them, to argue that they can do something that perhaps they don't think they can, and to tell that to other people. Perhaps go and speak to their teacher, or go and speak to a potential employer, or speak to their family and help. We need to feed back to the system when things are not working well. So when we see, for example, that the school is not offering the right qualifications, we need to tell people. And ultimately that becomes part of a process of developing a system, an education and employment system that can help people. So Career guidance is about working with individuals and working with groups, but it's also about working with systems, and that's, I think, very important. So let's move on to our last section and think a little bit about career guidance and social justice. So what do we mean by social justice? This term is sometimes, it's thrown around, it's used in a lot of different ways. So what kind of thing do we mean by it? Well, um, Iris Marion Young, who's a writer who writes a lot about these things, she says, well, it's really got five main components. The first is exploitation, feeling that life is unfair, you're poorly compensated, you're forced to do things you don't want to do. Marginalisation, that you have a loss of work, of power and respect, that you're powerless, you're always on the receiving end of all orders. You experience cultural imperialism. Other people put their norms on you, they put what they expect on you, maybe not something that you want. Or violence, you experience random, unprovoked attacks, perhaps actual physical attacks, but more usually in learning and in work, these are going to be bullying. They're going to be people making sexual harassment to you and so on. And so all of these things are what we might describe as injustice. Iris Marion Young calls them oppression. These are the five faces of oppression: exploitation, marginalisation, powerlessness, cultural imperialism, and violence. And social justice is then the struggle to challenge these things and to give people access to an authentic life of their own, where they can find decent work, where they can be who they want to be, and so on. So social justice is a process of struggling against this kind of oppression. And when we think about some of this, I'm not going to try and lecture you on what the experiences of young people in Kenya are, but I found this very interesting paper that was written, and it talks about what some of the big challenges that young people in Kenya are experiencing. And it goes through all sorts of different things. So, but the top things, the most kind of common issue that people say they're experiencing is these lack of employment opportunities. Um, and then, very closely related to that, the next one is financial difficulties. And then, of course, drug and alcohol abuse is a big issue. But then we've got lack of access to education and so on. So if we think about the problems that young people in Kenya are articulating, if we think about the problems that they're experiencing and what they're dealing with, then we're dealing with problems which are, in fact, problems of career and problems of social justice and lack of access to work, lack of access to decent financial compensation, and a lack of access to employment, and so on, to education, and so on. So, in order to think about this, we've developed what we call the 5 signposts towards socially just career guidance. And so I'm going to quickly go through these and just give you a little bit of an idea about what we mean. So what we're saying is, when we're doing career guidance with people, what we're trying to do is to help them to challenge those kinds of forms of oppression and to move beyond them. So how does somebody do that? Well, the first thing we do is we work with people to build their critical consciousness. We help them to understand the situation that they're in, not just to react to it on a personal level, but to understand what's going on. Now, understanding you're oppressed, understanding that society's unequal, understanding things aren't fair is not the same as solving it, but it gives you the best basis from which to solve that position. So it's very important that we actually help people to do that. The second thing is to name oppression, to help people to see injustice, to organise in solidarity against about injustices, and to try and access a decent career. So that might mean helping people to see when they're experiencing sexism, when they're experiencing racism, whatever it might be that the oppression that they're experiencing is, they need to be able to name it. And once they can name it, they can work with others to try and solve it. Our third signpost is to question what's normal. So that's about thinking about What is it that everybody wants me to do? What is normal? What is everybody else doing? And then as career guidance professionals, what we're trying to do is to work with people and say, is what's normal what you want? It's not to say that doing the normal thing is a bad thing. It doesn't have to be. But doing the normal thing is something which is, society's rules are being put onto you. And it's important to question those, to challenge them, to rethink them. Our fourth signpost is to encourage people to work together. It's to recognise that people's career development comes not out of them alone, but around the people around them, their family, their community, their friends, their colleagues at work. And the strategies that we adopt are always about encouraging people to work together. And then our fifth one is to work at a range of levels, to recognise that problems are not simply problems of decision making, problems that individuals experience. They might be problems about how the organization that they're part of, let's say the company they're part of, works. They might be problems of politics. They might be problems of society, of culture. And when we're doing career guidance with people, we need to help people to think about these things and then also think about what mechanisms they've got for changing and challenging them. So I'm just going to give you a quick example that I found very inspiring that comes from an article that I found, which is about women's experience of domestic abuse and trying to work with them around career development. So what happens is that this is in a homeless shelter in the United States, actually. And so, sorry, not in a domestic abuse centre. So when women leave their husbands, they've perhaps been abused, they can go away and they can get some safety and some shelter. And what happened in this example was that the people who ran that centre found that increasingly those women were not able to really build a new life apart from their abusive partner, their abusive husband, without doing something about their employment. So they needed to be able to develop their skills, develop their situation economically. So the oppression that they experienced at the hands of a partner required not just dealing with that relationship with the partner, but also putting them in a new situation economically. So they developed a career development program within this women's shelter to help them to develop their career aspirations and support them to move into work, find better work, and so on. But as well as that, they also did a number of things that I've just talked about in our 5 signpost model. So they helped people to develop an awareness of the community. The idea you're not alone. There's lots of other women in a similar position. Some of them have been through this. They're now successful. They've gone on. So what we want you to do is to recognise that you're not alone. You've got this source of support around you. And you can draw on this source of support and also understand that your experience is not, you're not alone. You've got an experience that many other people have got. And once they identified themselves with this group, they were then able to talk about how domestic abuse happens, analyze some of the power dynamics, and then to critically self-reflect on it. So to think about how they were responding to this, how they were building their life, how they could avoid falling back into another relationship that was similar or going back to their husbands or whatever it might be. And they did that through diaries and journaling and encouraging these women to really think deeply about what was going on in their life. So what we've got here is a very multiple strategies going on. We've got very practical things that are about finding work, improving your situation economically, down to sort of very deep critical reflection, thinking about norms, thinking about how power works, thinking about abuse, and so on. So this is a really good example, I think, of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these sort of social justice approaches to career development. But I think we always want to be very wary of one-size-fits-all models. And my colleague Ronald Sultana, who sadly died a couple of weeks ago, who was great inspiration and influence on all of us, and he really thought a lot about the situations that people go through in countries outside of the sort of European and North American examples that I've mainly drawn on in what I've presented to you today. So Ronald said localisms are more likely to be relevant and useful in response to the specificity of context. They're also more likely to serve the interests of social justice. So his thing here is that just because something worked in America, just because something worked in the UK or in Europe, doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You need to build and develop approaches to career guidance for yourself. So find it useful. Look at the 5 signpost model I've given you. Look at the other ideas that I've presented, but do something that makes sense to you in your context. So this is about reflecting on your labour market, on the nature of inequality, of the informality of your labour market, of the level of mobility that exists within your labour market, and then also thinking about your culture, your community, your spirituality, your identity, your reflexivity. And so what we want to see is models coming out of Kenya that are not just repeating what we've done in the global north, but are actually finding things that fit with your context. So models that you might want to think about need to reimagine career guidance for your local context, cultures and ways of being, draw inspirations from other countries. Of course, hopefully we can be useful to you, but remake career development and career guidance in your own image. This means building new theories, new models and new practices that make sense to you. So thank you for listening. I hope some of this has been of interest. So to conclude here, I'm going to say that our careers are the substance of our life. They're how we find our way in the world. And you don't have to know that you've got a career to have one. But career guidance can help us to make sense of life and to find our path. So young people are engaged in a process of social career learning that we can support through career guidance, through scaffolding their learning, taking them around one of these learning models that I just presented. And there are many useful models of career guidance out there, including the 5 signposts that I've presented to you. But it's also important for you to make your own approaches, and I think that's really central. So thank you again for listening. Here's my contact details. I'm happy to answer any questions, but please do get in touch if you've got questions for me. Thank you.